Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding Expertise Results, Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Russia's military invasion this week has many Ukrainians in the U.S. concerned for loved ones back home and the country itself.
I am fearful for my friends, for my church, for my colleagues, and for all people of Ukraine.
Ahead, we talk to an expert about the unfolding situation. Librarians and educators are concerned by attempts at the state level to regulate what books they can keep on the shelves.
What I am concerned about is that librarians are going to be so afraid of being prosecuted that they're going to stop collecting materials that meet the needs of their patrons.
For now, legislation that would weaken library protections from prosecution is in limbo. And a fifth turkey farm in southern Indiana has tested positive for avian flu, leading to the depopulation of more than 150,000 turkeys. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Russian troops launched a broad assault on Ukraine this week. President Joe Biden says the conflict will lead to a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. And as Sarah Whitmire reports, Ukrainians in the U.S. are keeping a close eye on the situation back home.
The situation in Ukraine has been escalating for quite a while. For at least a few weeks, the U.S. has been predicting that Russia's President, Vladimir Putin, would falsely claim that the rebel-held regions of Ukraine were under attack to justify an invasion. Olga Antonova fled to Zionsville a month ago with her 2 children and husband because she was fearful of a Russia invasion of Ukraine.
If not my children, I wouldn't come. I would stay in Ukraine because it's my homeland and no matter what's going on. But because I was afraid of their closing like the window of opportunities for us to leave.
Antonova is among the roughly 19,000 Ukrainians living in Indianapolis. More than 1 million Americans of Ukrainian descent currently live in the U.S. Antonova worked with the Mission to Ukraine to come to the U.S. The group provides resources such as food, medical services, and shelter for Ukrainian women, children, and those with disabilities in the state.
I think that most people are assuming that this is a new thing. That Russia just decided, but they've been occupying parts of the East and the South for 8 years now.
The organization has started an emergency fundraiser to help their relatives and friends who are still living in the Ukraine.
I am fearful for my friends, for my church, for my colleagues, and for all people of Ukraine.
Antonova hopes it's possible to go back home when it's safer.
The younger one is in middle school and the older one is in a high school, and they need to go back to their studies and they need to go back to their classmates and to their normal life.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Sarah Whitmire.
Indianapolis ranks 7th in a list of cities in the United States with the largest Ukrainian populations. Well, we're joined now by Barbara Skinner, a professor at Indiana State of history and an expert on Ukraine, Russian history, and the Cold War. Welcome to the show, Professor Skinner.
Thank you very much.
So, many see Ukraine as a fledgling democracy. How important is it for the West to stand up for countries like Ukraine?
It's imperative. There are 2 big issues that are at stake here. And the first one is definitely the idea of supporting democracy against an autocratic regime. So Ukrainians share democratic values with the West. They have freedom of speech, freedom of the press, free and fair elections. And the Russian aggressor, of course, represents an autocratic regime that is anti-Western, anti-democratic, and pointedly anti-American, I should add. Putin has a real chip on his shoulder against the US and often aims his talks right at the United States. So in Russia, you have no free speech, you have state control of the media, and if you want to oppose the regime, this opposition is suppressed by force. So we absolutely have to support those who promote our values, and that's Ukraine. But the bigger issue is the rules-based order in the post-World War II world. Vladimir Putin has willfully and unprovoked he has violated those international norms, and this really affects the entire world and creates a kind of uncertainty over our decades-old security norms that have been there since 1945. So those are the two big reasons why we have a big stake in this fight.
And let me jump in really quick. The U.S. and Western allies are imposing sanctions, but won't intervene militarily because Ukraine is not a NATO member. So what else can the West do to punish Russia and Putin for the invasion? And then does any of it matter?
Sanctions seem woefully inadequate, and we need to get our European partners to agree to some sanctions that are going to hurt them, probably more than will be hurt here in the U.S. But those measures are being considered. What I would like to ask is why is no one speaking about Belarus here? Belarus has served as a launching pad for the Russian assault on Ukraine, and they are fully complicit in this blatant violation of international law. So I think they need to be punished as well, and I hope that I'll see that.
Professor, thank you so much. We have to leave it there. Appreciate your time today.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Legislation that would weaken a library's defense if prosecuted for providing harmful materials to minors is in legislative limbo. Before the bill's progress faltered, librarians and educators across the state voiced concern over how it could affect what materials they could keep on shelves. Benta Boutier reports.
In a demonstration against Senate Bill 17, locals gathered for a read-in outside the Bartholomew County Library last week. Many read books with themes about global warming, censorship, or LGBTQ rights. The bill passed the Senate last month, but House leaders said last week it won't make it through that chamber. Bartholomew County Library Director Jason Hatton says he started paying attention to the bill when it was first introduced. He was aware of a similar bill introduced last year that didn't make it out of the Senate.
Right now, as the law stands, we can say, no, we're librarians and we're doing this within the course of our work.
Language in Senate Bill 17 would remove educational purposes as a defense public or school libraries could use if something in their collection was deemed harmful to minors, which is a criminal offense. Under Indiana law, material harmful to minors is defined under 4 categories. It describes or represents in any form nudity or sexual excitement, considered as a whole has an excessive interest in the sex of minors, goes against the adult community as a whole standards for suitable material for minors, and considered as a whole lacks literary, artistic, political, or scientific value to minors. Hatton says the definition is too subjective.
There are 4 points that are laid out, but again, they're very much open to somebody else's interpretation of that.
But bill co-author Senator Jim Toms says the material would have to fall into all 4 categories to be pursued legally, and the bill doesn't ban anything.
Literary novels that has maybe in the book itself, it may have reference to some kind of adult sexual activity or something. It doesn't affect those books, are not part of it.
He emphasized it means libraries couldn't argue these materials were kept for educational purposes, and the bill is about protecting children. He introduced the bill in a Senate committee in January.
Good sense, common sense will tell you what we're talking about here. We're not talking about some kind of a book. They might have something in it that is of a nature that it may be above some of the kids' grade levels, but it's not anything like what we're talking about here. It's not obscene. It's not completely vulgar.
But Chad Heck, a librarian with Pike High School in Marion County, says libraries already don't carry this type of material.
That's not what we do. We do collect materials that may have sexuality in them, but when you look at them as a whole, that's not what their book is about. It may be a scene, it may be a part of a character's experience, but it's not porn.
Heck agrees that the legislation leaves too much room for interpretation. Both he and Hatton worry legislation like Senate Bill 17 would cause a chilling effect.
What I am concerned about is that librarians are going to be so afraid of being prosecuted that they're going to stop collecting materials that meet the needs of their patrons.
Hatton and Heck say libraries have formal processes in place if someone has complaints about library material. Even if the language from Senate Bill 17 makes it no further this session, Betsy Burrow-Flack, who teaches a course on banned books at Valparaiso University, says it marks a shift in how people view public education.
That they should be places where people under 18 go to have their own families' ideas reinforced, as opposed to the idea that a public school exists to educate people for the good of society.
She adds, even if the legislation doesn't move forward, it takes time and effort from librarians and educators to advocate for themselves. Hatton says the legislation calls into question his training and how he does the job he's been trained for.
We will continue to do the job that we were educated for and that we do, and that's to provide materials for every single person in our community. We want to have those materials for everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you for reading a story with me.
Tom says he will try to get Senate Bill 17's language amended into another bill before session is over. And if it doesn't pass in some form this year, both Tom's and co-author Senator Jeff Rott say it will be back in future sessions. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Benta Boutier.
For more headlines from around the state, we're joined by Holden Absher. Hello, Holden.
Hi, Joe. A Senate committee gutted a bill that would have eliminated Indiana's license requirement to carry a handgun in public. The changes came after 8 hours of testimony and debate Wednesday. But President Pro Temp of the Senate, Roderick Bray, says that the changes violated Senate rules, forcing him to stop the measure from moving forward. Law enforcement officials and groups opposed the bill, saying it would stop or strip police of screening tools. And Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter raised eyebrows as he called out Republican lawmakers and their supermajority.
It stifles, prohibits, and oftentimes limits public debate. I sure hope you choose to show deference to law enforcement professionals.
Bray says the House and Senate will look for new landing spots for the bill's original language. The official results of Bloomington's remonstrance period are in, and 5 of the 7 areas have successfully voided the city's annexation. As Joe Wren reports, Monroe County Auditor Catherine Smith released the certified results Wednesday.
Areas 1A and 1B did not meet the required 65% petition rate, but they did reach the 51+% threshold to appeal annexation in court. But the process is far from over. Many of the petition signatures are invalid due to remonstrance waivers. Waivers are agreements property owners sign that prohibit them from challenging annexation in exchange for city services such as water and sewer. Now, the city says all waivers should count despite a 2019 state law that invalidates waivers more than 15 years old. Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton says the law is unconstitutional because it retroactively voids a legal contract.
If they are recognized, which we believe they should be, as you indicated, the vast majority of this annexation goes through automatically because most of the people, most of the parcels in these areas agreed to be part of the city in the past years.
If the city takes the Indiana legislature to court and wins, all but 2 areas would be automatically annexed. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Joe Wren.
1 week from now, Monroe County will no longer have an indoor mask mandate, joining every other county in the state. Monroe County and Richland Bean Blossom schools, which were among the last in the state to still require masks, voted this week to end their mandates next Friday. IU announced last week its mandate would also end next Friday. The moves coincide with the end of the county and state's emergency health orders on March 4th. Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton says a local income tax increase is once again possible this year, although he did not propose a specific percentage. Hamilton made the remarks during his 7th State of the City address Thursday night. In order to raise the local income tax, Hamilton would need the support of the Local Income Tax Council. Hamilton says the city needs to make major investments in public safety, including increased police salaries and new facilities and equipment for police and fire departments.
Recent federal support has been essential, but it is not ongoing. There is no way to pursue our ambitions and walk our walk without more local resources.
Hamilton also says he will form a green ribbon panel before summer to advance the city's climate action plan. Additionally, he announced that the city is advancing a diversity, equity, and inclusion coalition. That's all the time we have for headlines. Joe, back to you.
Thanks, Holden. Of course, we'll hear a lot more about annexation numbers as well coming up. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Another turkey farm in Du Bois County has been infected with the avian flu, leading to more than 35,000 turkeys being euthanized. And we visit the story of the Freeman Field mutiny by Tuskegee Airmen at an airfield in Seymour. Those stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Public media's role now is more than ever to get the facts out, to be as transparent as possible, and to tell the truth as we know it.
There's a lot of information out there, and it's really hard to know what you can believe, which is why I think people turn to us again and again.
It's public media's role to try to help educate and enlighten.
PBS continues to be one of the most trusted institutions in the country.
We really do go out and meet the moment as it's happening.
We are there at the front lines asking tough questions and getting important and robust answers.
We're playing a major role in combating lies, fake news.
As journalists, we are trying to bring the most fair coverage that we possibly can.
It's about digging deeper and talking to the powerful and especially to the powerless.
Public media is the place where you cut through all the noise.
We move forward by staying true to our values.
And on PBS, news is human.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. A third turkey farm in Du Bois County has tested positive for the avian flu this week. It's the 5th farm in southern Indiana to test positive since the outbreak began earlier this month. More than 35,000 turkeys were euthanized at that farm, bringing the total number of turkeys depopulated in the state to more than 154,000. An outbreak in 2016 led to the depopulation of more than 400,000 birds. We're joined now by Denise Derer-Spears of the Indiana State Board of Animal Health for more on the avian flu. Welcome to the show, Denise.
Thank you.
So let's just start. What causes the avian flu and how does it spread?
Avian flu is caused by a virus. It's carried by wild migratory waterfowl. We know that they can carry the disease, they can get sick, but yet they don't get ill, and they can continue to migrate and spread the virus in their feces when they are congregating in different places as they move across the country on their normal migratory patterns. So that presents a danger, because if someone were to walk through those, they could, or drive their vehicles, it could easily carry that virus particle onto farms if biosecurity is not practiced.
So this outbreak has led to the depopulation of more than 100,000 turkeys. So how do you try to contain an outbreak like this?
The big thing is biosecurity is number one, and that is trying to keep any foreign organisms, the germs, the viruses out of the barn situation, where they try to keep the birds healthy and free of disease. And that means changing clothes, changing shoes. Don't wear the same thing in the barn that you wear in public or other places. The farmers are watching very, very closely for any signs of disease in their birds or changes in behavior. Like a lot of them are finding that the birds who get sick are quit drinking water as much. So all of those kind of things are really important for fast response.
How worried are you about a repeat of 2016 when 11 farms in the state were impacted and more than 400,000 birds were put down?
2016 was a high watermark year for us, and we really, really want to avoid that. We're hopeful that that's going to play out that way. We currently have 5 farms affected in the state of Indiana. Poultry farmers are really on top of this as far as watching for any signs. They're testing quickly, they're responding quickly by depopulating the birds, which is an important part of keeping the virus from multiplying and spreading outside. We learned a lot as an agency, and so did the poultry industry back in 2016, and just trying to put some of those quick response lessons into practice is really helping this year.
Just under 30 seconds left. Indiana ranks 3rd nationally in turkey production. So what kind of impact do outbreaks like this have on the industry?
The big thing is it as a whole, it could affect our ability to export international trade. Indiana is a major poultry producer, and it affects more than turkeys when it talks about international trade. On a more local level, it's a big impact on those individual farm families that have lost their livelihood.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Indiana State alum and trustee Cynthia Powers has donated $150,000 to start the Quentin P. Smith Senior Endowed Aviation Scholarship, which aims to increase aviation opportunities for minority students at Indiana State. Smith was a first lieutenant in the Army Air Forces during World War II when he was briefly stationed at Freeman Field in Seymour. There, he was one of 101 Tuskegee Airmen who were arrested for refusing to acknowledge the base's segregated officers' clubs. As part of Black History Month, we revisit a story by Mitch Legan on the Freeman Field Mutiny.
To Seymour and back, easily, no refueling needed or anything like that.
Tim Molinari always wanted to be a pilot. Growing up in Seymour, he was often at the local airport, where he'd spend hours watching planes fly in.
Every so often, my dad would take me out here and we would check out the planes and just whatever's out on the tarmac or anything like that.
As he grew older, he learned the history of the small airport and was surprised to learn during World War II it was home to an air base and Tuskegee Airmen who set the example for Black Americans fighting segregation right here in Indiana.
I noticed a plaque outside the museum and I realized that that plaque wasn't enough to honor the Tuskegee Airmen. It was good that the plaque was there, but it just really didn't bring out how significant the Tuskegee Airmen were.
For his Eagle Scout project, Molinari constructed a plaza outside the airport honoring the airmen.
I knew it as Freeman Field Army Airfield.
And is now collecting funds to place 2 statues nearby.
Take that bush out and put a statue right there, and then one on this bush, and they would both be life-size statues.
In March of 1945, a Black Air Unit, the 477th Bombardment Group, arrived at Freeman Field in Seymour to learn to fly large bombers.
In reality, everything was widely segregated, and so no base really wanted these guys.
There, inadequate training continued, and members of the 477th were told not to step foot in the Officers Club for supervisors, who were white, and instead use the club for trainees.
Now, this was a thinly veiled attempt to further segregation on base, but Army regulations actually prohibited segregation in military buildings, like the one behind me, and this was something the 477th was aware of.
Some of these guys were combat veterans. They had flown in Europe already. And they didn't want to hear any of this crap about segregation or inferior facilities, so they decided it would be a good idea to integrate the White Officers Club.
Over the course of days, black soldiers attempted to enter the club and were denied, leading to the arrests of 61 airmen. Base leadership then demanded the soldiers sign an order saying they understood they were not allowed in the club. 101 refused and were arrested.
There's a deliberate calculation taking place here, trading blood for citizenship, right? Service for citizenship. How do you deny basic constitutional rights to people who fought to defend the Constitution?
News of what became known as the Freeman Field Mutiny quickly spread across the country, making the Army look hypocritical at home as it fought for freedom overseas.
Those commanders were replaced. Benjamin Davis was selected, and it became the first time an African American was in charge of a military base in the continental United States.
The mutiny was key in the desegregation of the military, which would occur 3 years later, but it was also one of the earliest and best examples of African Americans using nonviolent protest in their fight for racial justice.
Freeman Field Mutiny was an example of nonviolent protest that became a model for the civil rights movements in the 50s and 60s.
Now that many airmen are no longer with us, Duvall is working to keep their legacy alive and highlight the heroes' deep ties to the Hoosier state.
This isn't a matter about what someone else did wrong. This was a matter of what the airmen did that was right, and having the courage to do what's right regardless of what they thought could happen. They did the right thing without expecting an immediate reward.
With his leadership, a stretch of I-65 near Seymour was designated the Tuskegee Airmen Highway in 2016. He's offered to help guide Molinari's efforts on the statue project too. Tim's collected half the funds, but still has about $40,000 to go.
The story is much greater than just flying airplanes. It's about wanting to serve one's country for the purpose of attaining the greater benefits of what our country and Constitution have provided.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.